Yeah. All right, this should be working. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Brainfood Live on Air, bringing it to you every Friday, folks. Even after a heavy week of partying, I have to say, I don't think I've drank this much for a very long time, and I'm feeling a little bit worse for wear, I have to say. So I've got my coffee in hand, and I want to pile through this amazing conversation we're about to have. Thank you all for joining us today. It is episode 183, and it is a topic that I think is kind of unfortunate, but really important. All of us, I think, have been aware, particularly those of us who work in tech, have been aware of layoffs, of downturn, of talk of recession, and of course of recruiters being in on amongst that number of people being made redundant. I don't think any of us are. I think most of us know, should I say, someone who has been affected in recent days. One thing I wanted to kind of discuss with everybody is we've seen a lot of practical support for recruiters that have been on the market, which has been fantastic. But we have very little in the way of psychological support, it seems to me. And I think this is like completely under-addressed. I'm someone who's never been made redundant, so I'm very fortunate in that respect. But I can imagine an involuntary redundancy to be quite a difficult emotional thing to go through. And I reckon we could do well by talking about it. And today, that is the topic of discussion. What is the psychology of recruiter redundancy? What do we need to know? What are the emotions we can expect to feel? How long might those emotions sit with us? How do we accelerate through it? What are the techniques, the practical techniques that we can employ to make sure that we kind of end one chapter of our professional lives in a way that gives us the foundation to be positive in the next step? So that is the conversation today. I thank you all for joining us and having that chat. Anyway, let's firstly confirm you can hear me okay. So folks, everyone on Crowdcast, if you can hear me and see me okay on video, you can hear by audio, let me know in the chat stream whether that is okay. We should be blasting this out in multiple places, including my LinkedIn. So if you can see me on LinkedIn, why don't you say so on the chat stream? Let me know actually on the comment thread whether that audio is okay as well. We should be out on Twitter and Facebook as well. So this is going to keep on going for as long as Elon Musk keeps the video feed live on Twitter. Okay, we can hear people fine. I think Crowdcast is at least is the one which I trust the most. So everyone's going to hear me okay. Okay, cool. Let's get on with the show. We always want to thank our sponsors for this show, folks. Every single week, a company comes up and sponsors this webinar. Without that, we will not be able to do these shows, which we do every week consistently. And so today, I'm really happy to thank our sponsors, MetaView, one of my favorite companies, which we've seen some really interesting, building a really interesting category of interview intelligence. And as is the new form, our way of doing the sponsor message now is actually to rope in a member of the team at the sponsor. They're going to give it to us direct. You don't need to hear it from me, folks. You're going to hear it from them. So we actually have Cameron Goldie Scott. What a wonderfully named person that is. If I ever wanted anybody to do business ops for me, I'd get someone with a name like this. I'm inviting Cameron on screen. He's going to pop in a moment, hopefully swagged up, and he's going to tell us all about MetaView. So Cameron, if you can hear me okay, just accept that invite. And there he is. There is the man. Great to see you, Cameron, and great to see the swag on display as well. Can you hear me okay, Cameron?
Yeah, I hear you perfectly. Great to be here, Hung. Thank you.
Fantastic stuff. I've been a fan of MetaView ever since I kind of met with Sile. Actually, he dropped me a line ages ago with just the kernel of an idea. And it's great to see him build that forward with a great team. And I think, you know, it's going to be a category of product that is going to be mandatory in 12, 18 months time for any business of any scale. Why don't you tell us a little bit about MetaView, Cameron? What is it? What does it do? Why should people care about it?
Yeah, of course. You can hear me, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, great. So I'm Cameron from MetaView. Super excited to be sponsoring this episode today. At MetaView, we are huge fans of the Brainfood community. And Hung, I've been following you for as long as I've worked in this space. So a bit about the company. MetaView is the leading interview intelligence platform focused on increasing quality and reducing bias in interviews. And especially in the current environment, it seems like every conversation that we are having with talent leaders emphasizes that it's all about quality over quantity. So at MetaView, we help by recording and transcribing interviews seamlessly, and then by providing powerful insights and tools for recruiters, hiring managers, and interviewers to help level up this crucial part of the hiring process. MetaView already integrates with your existing tech stack, so there's no need for you to swap out your ATS or to change your video conference provider. Implementation really does just take a few minutes. And what that means is that you can go from an old world where all you have after the interview are the kind of frantically written notes and maybe slightly fuzzy memories of the interviewer to a new world where you and the hiring team have full visibility into these crucial conversations. And this leads to fairer interviews, a better candidate experience, but most importantly, to better hiring decisions. We already work with a ton of high-performance, forward-thinking companies, including Brex, Clio, AngelList, Spotify, and a bunch of others. 90% satisfaction rate among our users and 5 stars on GT. For anyone who would like to learn more, then next Tuesday on December the 6th, we are hosting a live 30-minute demo where we will showcase all of our latest features and focus specifically on how we enable companies to supercharge quality of hire. So it's the perfect event for any folk that are focused on keeping the bar for quality really high, or just for people who would like to dip their toe in the water of interview intelligence. Reserving your spot is really, really easy. Just head over to metaview.ai and click on the homepage banner to register. Really looking forward to it. Hope to see a few of the Brainfood community there. Anyone has any questions, then you can also just email me on cameron@metaview.ai. So I've probably outlasted my segment, Hung, but really looking forward to the upcoming
session. I was going to say, I've got to watch the scope creep with some of these sponsor messages, but I'm pleased to hear it, and I think it's important that people get the full gist because it isn't a new category for a lot of folks. And I feel like it's important that people get educated on it. Anyway, I've just shared the link in the chat stream, folks. So go ahead and register on that. It's Tuesday next week. I think it's Tuesday, isn't it? The 6th of December.
Tuesday,
and yeah. And basically, it's going to be a 30-minute demo. You can just watch it. Like, you don't need to book a separate thing. Just a public demo. You can see how this thing works. If you like, go ahead and grab a trial version of the product. It's a really interesting category of product to get involved in. Cameron, great to see you on the show. Thank you so much for your message. I hope you're going to hang around and spend a bit of time with us when we're talking about this other topic, which is a bit more difficult.
Absolutely, yeah.
But important one for us to discuss as well. So great to see you, Cameron, and thanks for your message, man.
Cool. Thank you very much, Hung. Bye now.
What a nice guy. And yeah, great product, guys. So go and check it out. Okay, let's get on with the topic. Psychology of recruitment, recruiter redundancy. Particularly if you're a recruiter, you've been made redundant. What are you meant to feel? How are you meant to deal with it? That is what we're going to talk about. We're going to bring on some guests that know what they're talking about, either because they are people who have come from psychology backgrounds and are now working in people type roles, or there are people who have actually recently, and I believe one of our guests is currently in a situation where they have been made redundant. So we're going to bring these folks on and we're going to have a good conversation with them. Let's bring on Linnea firstly. Let us also bring on Octave. I don't see Katrina anywhere. I wonder where she is. I wonder whether she's dropped into a different thing. Oh, there's Linnea.
Hello.
Hey, how are you doing? Nice to see you.
You too. Thank you for having me. I'm good. Thank you.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, Linnea, why don't you introduce yourself while people are coming on screen? Who are you? What it is you do?
Sure. So I'm head of people at a company called Alva Labs, which is a SaaS tool for candidate assessment. But I'm also a licensed psychologist. So hopefully that can come in handy for this conversation.
Absolutely, it can do. Oh, Kat is on here. She's called Kat. See, Kat is the problem. You know what I mean? It's like I need like a sure identifier. So okay, Kat. There's two cats. Oh, there's the only cat that matters. Let's bring her on. Okay, great. And Octav, good to see you, man. Why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Hi. Thanks a lot, Hung, and hi, everyone. So I'm, now lead technical recruiter at Sneak. I've been probably the most recently made redundant out of the group, I believe. So yeah, I just finished up my my last day with Sneak at the beginning of the week. But yes, yeah, most recent experience into this.
And that's not the only relevant reason Octav's on the screen, because he's a very experienced recruiter, knows a lot about tech recruiting, etc., and he'll come back at some of the points. But I thought it'd be very pertinent to get someone in who's actually currently in this scenario, because this is fresh information. We wanna get that information as well. Okay, we have Chris Bright as well. Chris, great to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Sure. So I'm Christian. I am the recruitment lead at a company called Ruza. Ruza is a seafood network that connects buyers and suppliers. So I've entered the world of fish tech, I think you can say. I got this job after being made redundant earlier in the year, and kind of probably a few months ahead of what Octav is going through at the moment. So I'll probably share a few things.
Yeah, fantastic. And Katrina, great to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do, my dear?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kat, or Katrina. Either one. I am a business psychologist, a coach, and I've been working in people and talent for about 12 years. And I would say I am a people leader in active recovery. I've taken the last 6 months off of work. Yeah, short intro to me.
Great to see all of you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Chris, let me just share your LinkedIn to people as well, so that people can connect with you and know who you are. So let's talk about the current situation. I want to just make sure that I'm not the person who is concerned or overblowing a particular issue, but I've felt that essentially there has been very little guidance on the psychological side of it when it comes to redundancy. Like we've seen a lot of people step forward with practical solutions. I've tried to do something, other companies have tried to do, we're helping on the practical side, but what is the emotional journey looking like? Linnea, let's go to you first of all from a psychology perspective. What is redundancy? Why can we anticipate it that it might be emotionally a difficult moment for people?
I mean, first thing I would like to start with, your job is very tightly linked to your identity, right or wrong. We can discuss that in another forum, but that's still very true, that it's something we pour so much heart and time into. So when you lose that, you to some extent lose not only the hours spent during a day, but a large part of who you see yourself as. And I mean, there's a lot of data showing that when that happens, that's a big risk factor for mental health. Having a job is a very important factor to ensure your mental health. So losing it will have a lot of implications.
Yeah, I think that self-identity thing is particularly pertinent to us being in recruiting, because we do self-identify. I think if you're casually working someplace, it's just let's get some money in for the next couple of weeks, maybe a redundancy there would be less important. But if you identify in the career and in the field, this is what you do, and then you get involuntarily made redundant, told to leave. Of course you're going to take that as a body blow. That's a blow to your self-esteem, even for the people that, might feel that they've got particularly strong, thick skin, etc. It's still very difficult to handle that particular piece. Chris, let's go to you on this. Did you experience this when you were made redundant several months or so ago? How did you feel emotionally when you found the news? Okay, I'm out.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to process, definitely, because, particularly like with recruiters, you're so geared towards growth, right? You're so under pressure all the time to deliver on growth. And then it's like suddenly like not growing anymore. And because we're not growing anymore, we don't need you. And it kind of stops you in your tracks because you're like, well, it's not through anything that I've necessarily done. So it's not in my control, but I have to accept it. And now all this time, this effort, this like emotional commitment towards a job is suddenly taken away from you. And it's just, there's that sense of loss or almost grief that you kind of experience in the first few stages of it, that you can either go one or two ways with it. I mean, people deal with this in different ways, but I found it was very like, I was like, what do I do now? How do I spend my day? Like, it's almost like you ask yourself those type of questions because it's so geared towards a routine of like, right, okay, what's coming up today? What do I need to deliver on? How am I going to do that? How can I have an impact? And then suddenly it's like, well, that's all gone. So it is it's a real processing time to kind of get your head around. And I found it was tricky. Like, you definitely go through some stages of like sad, angry, but then you obviously have to accept it as well, because you can't do anything about it as an individual, as an employee. Like a company's made a decision, but you have to accept it. But it's tough because you're like, well, it wasn't like anything I did.
So maybe a sense of lack of justice then, because you're saying, hey, I performed, I did my job. I did everything I could. And sometimes being sacked or being made redundant, it's connected with the perception of, have you done your job well or not? And you're saying, Chris, in your context, you actually did your job well, but then you got kind of made redundant anyway. So there's an element of that's not fair. And that's a difficult thing to chew on. I don't think anybody deals with a lack of fairness in a great way. In fact, even monkeys don't deal with this very well. I don't know whether anybody saw that study. Have anyone seen this? It's great. It's actually probably unethical, to be honest. You're creating like a simian conflict. But they got these two monkeys, and they started treating one of them unfairly, like giving them less treats for no reason whatsoever. And they got like, it basically caused massive conflict between the two previously getting along monkeys, simply because a third party was providing unequal treatment, unfair treatment. So that sense of outrage is I think, very deeply inherent in how we feel. Chris, you mentioned like you got to accept it. Now, do you have to accept it? And is it something you immediately accept, or do you like, nah, I'm not having this? You go back and like argue the case. Octav, I've got to go to you because this is happening to you very recently. So when the message dropped, so to speak, did you feel did you go immediately to, okay, I accept this situation, or did you go and actually argue the toss? I mean, where were you with this?
That's a very good question. It's a very interesting one because I went through a roller coaster of emotions, and you just bounce off between different points. So yeah, you get the shock message and you immediately go into defense mode, like, wait, what, why? Then you start to try to understand the why. And depending now on the business, if they provide you a lot of context early on or later down the line, you'll find that the answer to that question is like, why me? Do I need to find it or fight it, or do I need to accept it? It depends a lot on what answers they give you early on. So the support that the company gives you early, the better it gets you to step through that hoop, let's say, and through that challenge. With me, it was very much, it took us a while to kind of understand the reasoning and kind of go through the actual details, the individual details. And it does happen especially in the UK, because we have different processes. But definitely don't accept it from the get-go. The first kind of point you go into emotionally, it's just defending and being defensive and trying to be, let's say, constructive in a way, trying to find a solution because you're worried about your future as a carer, as a someone who has, let's say, people depending on you, and so on and so forward. You want to make sure that, what do I do now and how do I move on? But yes, you also go with the rest of the roller coaster of emotions and anger and confusion and so on and so forward. It comes with a big package.
Right. So just for a bit of context, Octave, I hope you don't mind me saying, but you're a new father, I think, for the first time as well. So
to be
father to be, yeah, of course. So you got family to think about, and then this has just dropped down, and obviously it's Christmas and stuff. I totally get it. Which, by the way, folks, if anybody's hiring any fucking recruiters, Octave's right here. He's right here, man. Get on with it. Okay. Kat, we've got a few kind of like things here. There's a sense of surprise. There's a sense of shock. There is anger. There is all these types of very heightened emotional reactions, which are, how would you describe them? I don't want to call them negative, because it kind of implies like a pejorative assessment that I'm not making. But they're kind of, if you like, the darker versions of the emotional states we have, the kind of, those types of moods. What should we do when we have that mood? Should we kind of like get deep into it and embrace it? Or should we just like try and accelerate through it as quickly as possible? Like, what is the strategy to handle that situation? Do you go and punch the wall or something? You see Romelu Lukaku throw a punch at the side hoardings or something after Belgium got knocked out of the World Cup. Is that a solution for this scenario, or can you give us any tips or advice on this?
Yeah, I'd actually like to just quickly touch on something that Christian was mentioning around that kind of it's not something that you've done, like when you're made redundant. And I think the way that we approach work is that if I work hard, then I'll be rewarded. Like if I'm performing well, then I'll be okay in my job. And I think what redundancy really highlights is that nothing is permanent. Even when you're in a permanent job, there's nothing permanent about a permanent job. And I think until you've been made redundant or gone through a similar scenario, you go into an organization and think, as long as I can work hard, I'll leave on my terms. So I think there's a level of uncertainty around that, about lack of control of the situation, that I think is really hard for people to go through. I think with any kind of loss or grief, that kind of the sense of like the uncertainty and the lack of permanence about a situation or someone, in your life, I think that's difficult to deal with. And people don't like change. Like, no matter how much you try and make yourself someone open to, I'm curious about change, and yeah, I can, I thrive in chaos and whatever people want to say. Change is difficult to go through, and I think what we're talking about here is that change curve of like all the emotional states that you go through, and I think everyone responds to it differently, and everyone has different coping strategies for it, and at different points. But I think the really important thing is to feel your feels, as I say. So like whatever comes up, like just accept it. Some people actually are quite happy about being made redundant, and then they feel guilty about their happiness. So there's all these sorts of different emotions that come up. Rage, I always find if I'm angry, scream in a pillow. It's great. Like you get it out, but it's not in a harmful kind of, you're not making anyone feel unsafe. I always scream in a pillow, look like a crazy person.
But I'm not gonna watch out, Kath. I see you carrying a pillow around.
Yeah, okay. I mean, there's a pillow just there. I was furious. If you see me bringing it over to the screen. But I think you just have to feel whatever comes up and try and be kind to yourself and just be like, today I might feel depressed. Tomorrow I might feel a bit more upbeat, and then the next day I might feel angry, and it's quite a lot of confusion. So I think just let yourself feel whatever you feel, and it's not going to be the same as someone else. So, you know, someone might give you some advice or talk about what their experience was, but that might not be how it comes up for you. So I think just be kind, go out for walks. Like, not everyone likes meditation, but just breathe. Just remember to breathe. Like, actually take like a proper deep belly breath whenever you're feeling like the shoulders are coming up and it's all just a bit much, you know, you start getting in your head. Just like breathe and just like try to let it go. Yeah.
You've said a lot of interesting things there, and we'll talk about techniques to kind of restabilize your emotional states. I think definitely physical movements and stuff like that definitely will help. But I think it's something I didn't think about, but it's the lack of agency or control is one of the big disturbances. Like you might resign from a job, but you're in control of that. And there's zero stress. Even if you go to an uncertain scenario, you've decided to do that. And the stress level is going to be far less than being, you know, oh, this is not my call. I'm just like thrown into this. So it's the lack of sort of agency, which is, I think, one of the worst things that is the reason why candidate experience is bad, by the way, is the candidate feels lack of agency being funneled through a process. So we know already that this is not a good thing. It is the sort of the sense of it being a verdict on your performance. Even when, you know, and then if you think it doesn't map against that, then you're outraged that your performance hasn't been factored in. So there's that element. And I think there's some of the other people have mentioned in the chat there that there's the loss of the relationships, right? I mean, you're logging, even if you're all remote, you're still logging in every day. You're doing the stand-ups, you're doing the regular, all those things. Those relationships immediately change. And they'll never be the same again. So you can mourn for those relationships and the ending of that period of your life. In the same way, I think you might feel if you left school for the last time, or you you move town and you say goodbye to friends. You're not going to say goodbye forever, but you're saying goodbye for that experience you had collectively. So there's that mourning involved as well, of the loss of the social relationships. And finally, Chris, going back to what you said, there's also a lack of the routine. The routine has shifted. So suddenly now you have excess time because you've got at least a 40-hour window like block that you just, here you go, extra time. And yeah, you need to reformulate some structure. Otherwise you'd be lying in bed till 2 a.m. and 2 p.m. in the afternoon. You know what I mean? Or playing computer games till whenever, because you're out of the rhythm. So lots of reasons why this is emotionally difficult. So I guess the first message is for people who might be experiencing this for the first time, maybe less experience on redundancy, is that these emotional movements are expected and they're normal. And they're quite deep. Like, it's not a trivial feeling. They're actually very, very deeply felt, and it's normal to feel them, and maybe even be, a healthy thing to do so, as you say, Kat, very, very well. Does it get any easier? Anybody being made redundant multiple times? I don't think. I mean, has anybody on screen been made redundant more than once? And can you commentate on that? If you haven't, if anybody who's listening in, particularly folks who've been through a few recessions and what have you, does it actually get easier? I kind of think it should, but I don't know. I've never been through it, right? So let me know in the comments. I mean, does it get easier as you go through it because you've just experienced it, you've gone past, then you've experienced something more, and it's, oh, Chloe said very clearly caps locked it. So it's like Chloe is saying no, it doesn't get any easier. Very interesting. Chloe, do you mind me asking why you feel it doesn't get better? Maybe because each context is different, I guess. Okay. So what is the way that we should handle these emotions now that we've discussed them? We understand that they exist. How would we sort of advise somebody, even if you're advising yourself, recognizing everyone's different? So let's pretend we're just talking to ourselves. We've been made redundant. How would you advise yourself to handle these emotions? Any thoughts on this, Linnea?
Yeah, I would like to refer back to, has anyone heard of the behavioral train before? Like, emotions and thoughts are really, really hard to control. They just kind of come at us and they're there. We have to accept them. But what's in our control is actually what we do. So if you think about a train where the locomotive consists of the behaviors that you're doing, and the kind of storeholders afterwards are the the emotions and the thoughts. Meaning, even if you're feeling like crap, act as if you are within control. Act as if you will find another alternative. Act as if you are feeling good. This is actually how a lot of like CBT is done. So, like,
what's CBT?
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay, great. I thought that was a drug. I was like, what?
Yeah, it might be.
Just drop something in. No,
it's also therapy. No, so like I really agree with Kat that like you can only accept you can't really change your emotions, but you can control how your behavior is doing, and that will actually bring along the thoughts and emotion eventually. So if I were to advise myself in this kind of situation, I would think back to what makes me feel good. It's spending time with, the people I love. It's being outside. I'm a runner. I love running. And I would like try to do those things, even if I don't feel like it, because it will bring me into that state. So that's how I would, it sounds super corny, but it actually works.
No, I think it's absolutely right. It's basically you can manipulate your emotional states by your physical activity. Isn't there a cult in, and I mean cult again without any pejorative sort of view. I think it's in Asia somewhere. They do laughing like training, so they all collectively laugh, and they do this in order to create a higher sense of emotional state, and actually. There's evidence to say if you force yourself to laugh, like literally fake a laugh, eventually your body gets tricked and you end up feeling a little bit higher. And you can also reverse this. So in other words, if you want to feel miserable, try and not laugh. Like literally just put frowns on your face, all those muscle tensions to put a frown on your face, your mood level is going to go down as a result of that activity. So I think the physical action is important. And this is great if you already have an activity that you like or enjoy to do. And it may be difficult for some other people, a little bit more sedentary, for instance. We all get that. But would your advice be, okay, maybe it would be a good thing to do stuff that is just a bit physical. Go for a walk, as you said, Kat. Everyone can more or less do that. I think ableist kind of comment. But you know what I mean? 90% of people, I would guess, were able to do some sort of mobilization. Go for a walk, change your environment, take some deep breaths, mood changes. I would say bit of self-medication. Any thoughts on this, Chris? What did you do to get out of that initial funk when you kind of were made redundant last time around?
I think I just thought about my priorities. So my work was a big priority for me before, but it's no longer there. So now what is my priority? So my priority was my kids. My priority was myself. My priority was the house that I live in. And I kind of, and also finding a new job, of course. And I just, it sounds real cheesy, but just took it like day by day. It's like, okay, the point on like emotions, like you can't, like they just come and go, right? Like you feel rubbish and then you might feel a bit better. You can't block them out. You can't suppress them because it just actually doesn't help. So you're going to have days where I had days where I was like, oh man, this sucks. So I'm going to do something that's actually going to make me feel better. So I also like running. So I go for a run, or I take my kids out somewhere. Something where you just change your environment, change your state. I didn't allow myself to sit there and kind of dwell and sulk, because I knew I know myself, if I do that, I will get into a rut that way. So I was like, I'm not going to allow myself to do that. I'm going to do positive things that are going to like make some progress each day. And I did throw myself into my job search as well. I just went straight into it. I was like, right, okay, I'm going to use this energy that I've kind of got from this redundancy process, and some of it negative, and I'm going to channel that into something positive. And that something positive is getting like a new role, as well as the other stuff I've mentioned.
Is it possible you can go too fast, too soon into the job search after a redundancy? Because, and this is not a criticism on you, Chris, but it's just occurred to me that is the natural thing that people might do, just rush the CV out, just register with every recruitment rec to rec, start applying everywhere like a mad person. That feels like you should do. But would it make sense, and I don't know this, but would it make sense to go through that processing beforehand and then think about what it is you want to do? So another friend of mine said that Bass, I wonder whether he's watching this. He said actually it was a blessing because he never had time to think about what he wanted to do in terms of the companies he was joining. He was like, I'm in the middle of work. It's all like busy as. Oh, he was made redundant. Actually, okay, I'm going to take a week. Like you can just time box it and then just experiment, think about what he wants, and then boom, make a better decision next time round. What are your thoughts on that? Open question. Do you think rush straight in or take some time to reset? Octav, you want to say something?
Yeah, yeah, I think it depends a lot on the urgency of things, and it also depends a lot on, let's say, the package that you have. If it's something that's a bit chunkier, it allows you to buy more time. If it's less, then you have to put a rush on things. And everyone will have individual circumstances. For example, we've not talked about a lot of people who are on visas, for example.
Correct.
And they're in a foreign country, they will need to relocate back into their original countries if they don't find a job. So there's a huge pressure and urgency there. But with me, I've been in the same scenario as Christian, basically, but kind of jumping in between. I feel great. I feel okay. I should probably start looking, but what am I really looking for? So you kind of go through a cycle of rediscovering what is it that you want to do and you enjoyed about your role, what is it that you want to take forward, and then try to find a role that fits. In a better economy, I would say probably that wouldn't be a problem because you feel a lot more relaxed. But when everything seems that it's caving in, this is where all of these feelings do get amplified quite a bit more. So I think people do sense a bit more urgency now. Me, yeah, definitely feeling the pressure as to, okay, I need to move into something new. I need to find something. I need that security, let's say.
Yeah, good point. So we need to contextualize it in the individual circumstances. Very, very clear. I think also very pertinent to mention people that have, these extraordinary extra consequences of losing their job. And I think this, particularly in the US, where there is like a 60-day cutoff, a lot of these Twitter folks, they're on visas that are tied to their employment. And if they've just been summarily told to leave, they've got 60 days, not only to find a new job, but to find a job from a company that's prepared to take on that sponsorship. So there's also some additional administrative work to do. And if they don't succeed in doing that, they actually get deported. So think about the pressure that's leveraged on those people. And that's a topic for another conversation, because it just got me thinking, do we factor in the consequences of a redundancy to the individuals when we're making redundancy decisions? Because it means different things to different people. And when you look at the cascade effect of someone who needs to relocate, literally take himself, his family, everything out of the country and then maybe go back to a place he hasn't been to for 10 years or whatever. That seems to me like a crazy, excessive consequence of, as we said before, something that actually he or she might have nothing to do with, might have been a good performer, and then suddenly, major life change. So that's the circumstance. It might determine your sense of urgency. I guess the point I was making is it probably doesn't help you to just go like in a panic mode and just go mass splurge, because that just will involve you in lots of distracting conversations that may not be to your interest in any case. You're almost squandering your energy that you have in a spray and pray approach, which we advise everyone against. But that's something that we might default to if we feel that sense of pressure. So if your external environment is giving you a little bit of space, then take the time if you have it. to try and put your mind and body together so you can actually go and attack it further. Talk to me about the colleagues. So what is the relationship like with people who have also been made redundant at the same time? What is the relationship like with people who were made redundant slightly before you, if there's waves of it? And what is the relationship with people that haven't been made redundant? Again, this is new information for me, but for people who've been through it, and this goes to all of you on screen, all of you listening off screen, how is your relationship with the people who have not been made redundant?
I can go.
I'll go for. Oh no, you go.
Kat,
you go.
No, Kat, you go.
Okay. I was just going to say that I think there's something quite natural that happens, which is that people distance themselves from the situation that's caused them to feel a certain way. So I think to an extent that's healthy for a period of time, like while you're going through the process of all the emotions of the redundancy, like to not maybe speak to those colleagues for a while is okay, like those ex-colleagues. You don't want to burn bridges and you don't want to completely close off those connections, but I think it's good for the process to be able to let go and like move on, to have that break. I've been a survivor of redundancy rounds, and I'd say that if you're left and your friends have gone, you feel incredibly guilty as well. So I'd say that on the flip side of that, when you're left and you know that people have that the pressure that you feel to, you know, the additional work that you have, and that guilt of like, you know, should it have been me? Like, should it have been them? Like you feel all sorts of emotions as someone who stays as well. And you also maybe don't want to then communicate with them because you don't know what to say. You don't know what to do with your feelings about their situation, even though it's not about you at all. Yeah, so that's just a couple of points I'd say, Christian. Yeah.
I was going to say, like, I think I'm on good terms with people who are still in the company, and still speak to a few of them really frequently. I think a lot of that goes into how the actual process was handled as well. Like, you know, we see a lot on Twitter about like some good examples and some really not great examples of people being laid off. I was very fortunate that mine was handled very empathetically. You know, it was probably as well as something like that can be handled. And I think that helped me with the processing of like, yeah, I'm going to have more distance from these people, but also I know that it's had an effect on them. You know, it's not easy for them as well. And I think that enabled me to kind of move on and treat the relationship probably slightly different. Well, it's obviously different from how it was. So, yeah, I think it's one of the things I have learned, that like you don't want to burn bridges, as Kat says, because when you are looking for work, your network is one of the most powerful things you can have. And so people you have just recently worked with are a useful, you know, tool to help you find something new.
And to quickly add to that as well, it's not just the people that are left, but the people that are made redundant at the same time. I think, to me at least, that has been a very powerful community. We managed to get in touch with each other and kind of going into, okay, we're all going through the same emotions or similar emotions, and finding a community or joining a community that is, let's say, going through the same stage and offers you support on a daily basis, because we did support each other. We joked, we went out for drinks, we some of us at least, we exchanged like jobs and stuff and job advice, and offered support where we could in terms of, hey, this is how you should approach job hunting, or I don't know, or look at CVs and so on and so forward. But it made such a big difference to be engaged with that, let's say, group of people that was made redundant, and totally outside of the business context, basically. But that was a big help.
That's a really, really good point, Octave. So the just occurred to me again, there's obviously a big distinction between you being, let's say, the solo person being made redundant, which might be quite a devastating, even more devastating scenario, because it may well be more related to personal performance or what have you, and there's this lack of this peer group where, you know, if there's a tranche of people who've been made redundant, it's more explainable to say it's on a wider business context that no one's individually at fault for, but also you've got a cohort of people that are going through the same process at the same moment, and therefore can support each other going further forward. There's a really interesting, I don't know whether anybody heard this, but there's a really interesting, wasn't even a podcast. It was a recording of a therapy session by this psychotherapist that I'm quite a fan of. Is a lady called Esther Perel. I don't know whether either of you, anybody knows this lady. I think she's a Belgian person, but she's got a really amazing way to communicate these topics. And she basically was coaching two people that had been made redundant simultaneously, similar to, as you were saying, Octave, like friends and so on. And she said, look, it's really great that you have this relationship and this bond. But she then also introduced a warning to say, what you want to be careful of is that you don't sort of form the full focus of the new relationship that you have as ex-colleagues purely from the circumstance of being made redundant on this moment. Because it might be this is something that it becomes the thing that bonds you together. And actually what you want to do is this recognize that's a really important shared moment of adversity, but then try and build on something a more positive, essentially, and see whether you can go on from it there. And it struck me really, that bit of insight struck me really as quite important, because there's some relationships that I have that are based on negativity, I've realized. Do you know what I mean? They're like, why, like there's a friend of mine, like, why are we always bitching about the same thing that happened 20 years ago? Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's because literally we've not developed our relationship. Like, our relationship is purely about this joint complaint we had on this circumstance that is like decades old, and we haven't progressed our relationship. Not to anybody's, like, it's not hugely negative, but it's definitely not positive. We would have had a better and more positive relationship with each other and everyone else had we like found the wisdom to build on something else other than this joint complaint. So it was a really interesting podcast. I'll share it with people. Oh, there she is. Yeah, someone's shared Esther Perel in there. She should be a better podcaster. She's really, really great. She's one of these that basically is on talk shows, and the things she says are so amazing. She just needs to do a better job on her own podcast. Anyway, she's great. But that's an important thing to also think about. What about sort of the, have you observed any behaviors from colleagues that have been made redundant that you have that have caused you to think, and I direct this to, I think particularly Chris and Octave, but also Kat and Lene, if you've been through this process. Have you observed from some of your peer group who've been made redundant behaviors that you felt were actually not in the benefit of that person, but they've done something, they've externalized something, or they've withdrawn in some way? I mean, have they behaved in a way where you thought, actually, that probably isn't brilliant, I need to intercede, or someone should support this person in a different way? And if so, what would that be? What is that behavior?
It's a bit tough to say. I mean, I haven't seen anything too specific or too outside of the norm of people feeling a bit deflated and disappointed with the scenario. But then again, it's about the relationship that you have. Is it you all gang up on the idea that, hey, it's a negative thing and everyone kind of just throws in, or can we see past that, let's say, emotional or expression of negativity? I haven't seen much that was detrimental to others, or let's say anything that went in the wrong way, let's say, personally.
No worries. Can you imagine a behavior where you would actually say, yeah, mate, don't do that? I'm guessing, I guess what I'm trying to fumble at is that sometimes people like vent publicly, don't they? And they go and lambast their ex-employer, or they would maybe not directly, but indirectly do so, and it's obvious they're speaking about this person or that organization. You think, that's not going to help you, mate.
We've seen a couple of things like that, but all kind of handled with a bit of care and with a bit of white glove type of thing. So there were a couple of people that were, let's say, posting about their experience and so on, but I think everyone had enough integrity and respect about the work that they've done, the company that they've worked for, and so on. So yeah, I would say if you're in that position, it's best not to do anything that's rash and kind of acting on the spur of the moment, affected by the emotions that you have, because that would put you in a very, very difficult place. And especially if you're looking at the potential of employment further down the line, yeah, it's not putting anyone in a great scenario. Yes, you can vent out publicly, but then what does that bring you? And that's the question that everyone should ask themselves. I think seeking solitude in other ways, and solace, sorry, not solitude, but seeking solace in other ways would be better. But yeah, that's what we've seen, at least.
Yeah, very, very good. That was the point I was hoping to make, because I've seen people like vent out, and it's like, okay, the emotional state is understandable, but there's consequences to that behavior which will reflect back on you in a negative way, and try and find some alternative way to do that may not carry that risk. Folks, let's take a short break. We always do this in the middle of every show. Very, very important that we do it. The reason why is because Brainfood Live is a conversation starting show. It is not there to ever stop a conversation. This particular conversation is very important, and I want us to be able to keep talking about this even if and when we come off air, as we need to do so in about 10 minutes. So why don't we all take a moment, get your LinkedIn profile URL and share it in the chat stream in the right-hand side of your screen, and then make sure you connect with everyone who shared their LinkedIn. That way you can walk away from this conversation with at least a dozen or so more people that care about this particular topic. And if you wanted to go ahead and have that conversation with people sort of off air, or do some other thing with that, go ahead and do it. Let's emerge from this with a stronger network. I think that's one of the things that Brainfood Live is all about. Everyone should be just strengthened with their network. That's going to help you in every circumstance. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, by the way, do the same on the comment. Share your LinkedIn URL in there, and then connect with everyone who's also done that. Everyone should walk away with a dozen more connections that are in industry and care about this topic. Okay, let's move to sort of action, not action, because I think I don't want to sort of tell people here. Moves to action orientation, when people might get to that in a different sort of different pace or whatever, what that might be. But how important is it to have a structure of job search? Speaking to people who, again, directed to everyone who's done this, but it seems to me that it might make sense to structure it so that you can do certain things at certain moments, and it's there. This is how you're going to approach it, rather than just log on and sporadically scroll through stuff and ping things out. So there's two things that I think are worth exploring. Number one, because I think psychologically it might help to do it, and secondly, I think it might actually be more practically sort of efficient. Any thoughts on this, Octav, and anybody, but Octav in particular? What are your thoughts on structuring the job search?
Absolutely, and it comes back to what you mentioned earlier. You have to be very careful at how do you approach the job search. When in your, let's say, moment of clarity, do you go into that job search? Once you've found your North Star again, I think that's when you should start looking for a new role. And given the market, I mean, let's leave the market aside, but if you know where to kind of look, then the more opportunities you'll find. If you focus on what's really important to you, that's where you'll start singling out companies and thinking, okay, I want to be part of this company or this type of business or this type of industry. This is what will bring me joy. And just focusing on that, going into LinkedIn every day, searching for jobs is also very much energy intensive, and it will drain people very, very quickly. It's people say that, hey, job searching is a full-time job, and it is. But trying to abstain from that would be actually beneficial, because it gives you time to reflect, gives you time to think about which way do I want to take my career. And that's my approach at this point.
Yeah, very, very good. Any thoughts on this? Anybody else? Like, what can you structure your job search in such a way that's productive for getting results, but also mentally healthy? Lene, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is not just linked to job search in particular, but more generic. The first one is like making sure that it's easy to get started. Sometimes it's so easy to like procrastinate because, I mean, it's tough, it's draining. So having some sort of like ritual that makes it easy to get started and do kind of that ritual. It can be like, I always start with getting my coffee, put on my slippers, and then I start, because then you, just by getting the coffee, you're already doing it. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that I love is the Pomodoro technique, which pretty much means that you set a timer for like 25 minutes. And during those 25 minutes, you're not even allowed to pee. You have to like do the job hunting, but then you take a break so that you know that there's some like reward to it. So it doesn't come into this like, I have a 4-hour chunk of time, but like divide it. So I guess that's more generic stuff, but I find it helpful.
No, so basic productivity stuff useful,
Yeah.
right? So don't look at this endless job search. Like it could just be, a forever sort of vortex. No, you want to chop it into chunks, so that you've got like activity slots, and you say, right, here's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, however it's comfortable, but probably less than an hour chunks, right? You don't want to have like hours and hours, like a big 6-hour jobs. No, chop it into bits. Okay, any thoughts on this? Anybody else like structuring the approach?
I was just going to add that I think that recruiters are the best people that should be able to do this, right? Because we go to hiring managers, we ask them, what are your requirements? What are you looking for? What would be the best fit for the team? We might even have a structure that we follow of information that we take. And then we go out and create a sourcing strategy and a hiring plan, right? So we have all of these skills. We just have to apply them to ourselves when we're doing this. That's the only thing I'd add.
Yeah, I agree with that. This is kind of exactly what I did, where I thought, okay, where are the most obvious places I can go? I didn't want to go just straight out and start applying for a load of roles, because I know that, as Octave says, is really kind of intensive and can just drain your energy and your morale. So I basically like long listed, who do I know? How well do I know them? And the purpose was just really to start having conversations with people. Like, even if it was just a catch up, or if it was more like, oh, this person will be able to introduce me to somebody. But I felt it just gave me some momentum with it. And I was going to people, first of all, who I knew and who I trusted, and were kind of, at the very least, give like a sympathetic ear to you and be like, oh, that's, that sucks. Sorry, that's happened to you. But I was able to kind of build momentum from there. And what I found was like, I'd speak to somebody and be like, oh, let me introduce you to this person. And it was almost like this network effect. And before you know it, you were being introduced to people and you were talking about opportunities. And the role I got, at Ruser I got was through that. It was like, somebody I know, okay, I'll introduce you to this person. And just started talking to them. And then it kind of, escalated from there.
It's a really interesting observation, because basically no one eats their own dog food, no matter what sort of a discipline we work on. And we default to these behaviors. But of course, we should approach this very much as using the recruiting skills that we do have. And the problem, I think, with certainly if you see jobs that are applicant that you can just apply to, I think that makes sense. But you can't have that as the dominant activity, because what the situation there is, you're just allowing yourself to be a supplicant to someone else is going to say no to that, right? And never put yourself in a position where the other person has a yes/no verdict on you. You can do that for a certain limit of time, but try and control the outcome. As you mentioned, Chris, the outcome is to just have a conversation. You can control that. You're not looking for further agenda, but you're aware that having that dialogue is going to create something, and something positive. So that, I think, is an approach I'd highly recommend. It's almost like, the traditional job search activity, maybe that's 10% of your time. If you had 100% of time, maybe 10% is looking on things and applying. But at least 40% of it would be, okay, let's reactivate the network. Let's get in touch with a bunch of people. Let's have a chat with them, talk about market, talk about future, talk about whatever it might be. But then positive things will emerge from that. I would actually go a little bit further and say, in fact, let's put this out there to you guys. What are your thoughts on having a public and radically transparent approach to your job search? And I'm suggesting this purely as a bit of marketing. Like, I just think that if more people were aware of this is how you're approaching it, there's just more eyeballs at you. There's a chance something might happen. So I'm just imagining, again, the way this is vanity, but let's say I was someone foolish enough to employ me at some point, and they wisely decided to make me redundant, and I had to go and find a job. I would totally do that as public as possible. I'd live stream every day. I say I had 10 applications, 0 response. I'd make a joke out of the rejections. I would try and just be very, very public with everything, so that everyone will know, oh, this dude's on the market and looking. Because a lot of the time that's not obvious. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a good idea or not? Or is that just, that's just home being stupid?
I think it's a lot based on who you are. I think it makes a lot of sense, but you have to be comfortable with it. So you're not like pretending to use that strategy when it's not in line with who you are. So I think from like a marketing perspective, sure, but hopefully then it's in line with what you're comfortable with.
I think there's an element. I think there's an element of like, you've already been rejected from a company, so there's an element of like not wanting to amplify that further by putting yourself out there and then being rejected further. So yeah, exactly. It depends who you are and how resilient you are to rejection, and seeing that as a part of an experience. But I think it can work for the right person, but I wouldn't recommend it to everyone as a strategy.
All right, I think we get a clear message. We don't need to go around, but I get it. However, I would say some of these techniques could be adopted simply because visibility is a big part of the thing you need to try and achieve. Like one of the bad things about doing application only approach is that there's not enough people that are aware that that's your current situation. Yes, you may have published it once to say, yes, I'm on the market, I'm looking, but people will miss that message. So if you have to be very visible to say, look, yeah, I'm on the market, I'm looking, boom, make that obvious, make it even interesting, then I think you've got more chance of getting eyeballs towards you. Okay, we're over time, folks, got to finish it here. Let's go around one more time, just the last bit of advice to anybody who's going through this process right now, including you, Octav, because obviously you've got advice to give, even as you're through it yourself. Let's go around. Linnea, you go first. One bit of advice for someone who is either going through redundancy or maybe in future. This addresses people who are concerned about this. So what would you say to that person?
Don't do it alone. Find someone that you can do it with, regardless if they're in the same situation or not, but don't do it alone. Yep.
Very, very good advice. Make sure that you are in communion with others. Social isolation, especially having been shocked out of a social network, that you don't exacerbate that by just plowing a lonely furrow. Okay, go Chris.
Just take it one day at a time.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah, it's not like don't look at the long tunnel. It's like every day is a new day. Very, very good life advice. Never mind sort of recruiting advice. Kat, how about you?
For me, it would be to try and reframe it as the role was made redundant, not you, and try to remember what you're good at and what you can offer. Yeah,
really, really good advice. So separation of this idea that you are like your identity is this and it's a verdict on you. No, it isn't. That job is gone. So it doesn't, no one's going to do that. You know, it's not on you. Very important bit of insight. And Octav, final word to you. What advice would you give to someone in the current situation you're in?
Yeah, it's normal to feel what you feel. Go with it, but find your North Star. Find your direction once again.
Fantastic. And final word, Octav, in terms of the stuff that you're looking for right now, what is that job? What is the thing that would be, if someone wants to reach out to you, like?
Blessed, thank you. Well, I'm happy to do what a company needs me to do, be it that is a lead, let's say, or a manager. But if they want someone to bring impact to the technical hiring, I'm there to support them.
Fantastic stuff. Okay, well, listen, folks, thank you so much, the panelists, for your time and insight. I think a really interesting conversation. We could continue this chat going forward, but I think you know, it's important we have this conversation. It's the first time I've seen anybody talk it from like this perspective. I hope other people will do more of this, because I think it is useful and helpful. Okay, thank you so much, Linnea. Thank you so much, Octav. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you so much, Kat. You guys have a great weekend, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
And everybody, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, I wouldn't say enjoyed, but I hope you learned something from that conversation and got value from it. If you are on the market and looking, by the way, you want to try and join the Brainfood talent community, collective, sorry, I'm going to try and like expose and kind of highlight people who are currently on the market. And make sure you are talking to other people in industry. The network is super important, folks. That's the thing that's going to be, think of it like a network. It's a safety net. We need to build and make sure that that's going to be there for us going forward. So anyway, good luck to everyone who's in that situation, and tune in, keep sort of in touch with us as we go forward. Have a good weekend, everybody. Thanks for watching.